Hey guys, so right off the heels of the AI commercial videos that I've just been doing, I'd love to talk about specifically Hollywood gatekeeping and kind of the democratization that AI brings and tech in general brings, and what challenge that makes for us and how challenging we're going to have to grapple with that in the near future. Now, I'd love to do a more exhaustive talk about this, but these are just kind of my initial reactions just thinking about it. I mean, for me, I think Hollywood is a 100-plus-year-old industry that has been operating in a particular way with its own history and its way of doing things that has evolved, which is really amazing, right? Like movies and films and TV shows that and more that I've consumed like have shaped me and changed me and been a huge part of me. Like for example, like The Godfather. When I was a teenager, I would just watch The Godfather over and over again. Then it got me to read all the Mario Puzo books. I was obsessed. It was a big part of my childhood, a big part of who I am and my values around family and loyalty and filmmaking, all this kind of stuff. And from Arrival to Dune to Star Trek to a lot of things have shaped me that have come out of Hollywood, and I'm eternally thankful to what that city, what that industry has done. I mean, in particular, I feel that they have figured out that history, that the academy, all of that, they've figured out how to find some of the best stories, turn them into multi-billion-dollar institutions that affect everybody. And it's mind-blowing to me that what they do, right, is spend millions of dollars for you to spend 2 hours. It's just 2 hours. And yet, you go into a movie sometimes, and sometimes it's just entertainment and it's fun. You go in, you eat your popcorn, it's a date or whatever, and you leave, and that was it. That was a night. It was a nice night. And sometimes you go in there and it's life changing, and some of these films are more than films. Like Parasite to me is a really, really great film. And it also represented the rise of the Korean culture and film industry in general, and it is a point of major pride for Korean culture and modern Korean people. I think, even though a lot of Koreans will say, "Hey, it's not the best film that we've ever created," which might be true as well, but it's interesting, right? And it's fascinating that we have that industry that is has a lot of legacy and a lot of culture to it. It's a culture engine. Um, at the same time, Hollywood is gatekept, right? It is an industry that has its major players that have held that influence for 100 years or less, right? And for good reasons, because they've created institutions, right? The major studios or what have you. And then we also have the unions, which also have their own reasons for existing and ideology and for defending creativity, etc. And so AI to me kind of arrives in this moment as an ideological representation or almost like mythological or symbolic representation of the grievance that Hollywood has with technology in general. I mean, from the moment Napster and Kazaa arrived into the world, and torrents arrived into the world, and then eventually iTunes and streaming and Netflix and all of these, that long history in the last 20 years of Silicon Valley essentially disrupting what's happening in Hollywood, and yet Hollywood holding strong and being able to, and also crumbling as well at the same time, right? Where the strike to me was a result of the streaming industry kind of destroying DVD sales and theater sales in a certain way, and the pandemic too, right? All these hangovers kind of coupling, and then AI arriving right on top of that. And so I think that's where we, in a way, kind of find ourselves. At the same time, you know, technology has had this complicated democratizing impact on everybody, right? From the moment when I was a kid, when we could use GeoCities to create a website that anybody in the world could access, even though no one would. But like I used to have a multiple GeoCities website that I created back in the day, to a blog, to Tumblr, to Instagram, to Twitter, to TikTok, etc. we arrive now in a world where anybody within reason, taking into mind like economic structures and opportunity, etc., we have this system where anybody in the world can take a picture and post it online, and we get to benefit from that. Where I can hear some dude in Vietnam who counts while he sings. Like there's a guy who sings like 1, 2, 3, 4 or whatever. Like I can hear about this dude, or some dude in Moldova or in Brazil or what have you, or Russia or China or whatever, and I can access that. And all they had to do was spend some money on a phone to be able to do that. Is a wild democratizing impact of technology, which to me, from the perspective of just like humanity, if I zoom out to humanity, that to me, and I'm definitely biased, but is a beautiful thing. And yes, there is the dilemma of it has caused disruptions to elections, misinformation, disinformation, and the cult of personality, and egotistical megalomaniacs who have amassed way more power and influence than we ever could have thought, right? At a robber baron level. Yes, that is all true. But also we have a scenario where there are really, really sweet stories that if you go online, you can hear them every day. You can hear about a person who is grappling with cancer and how was saved by their community because they got to use it online. How people are like finding long lost family members. Every other day there's a story like this, right? And so within that, I see AI and how it could do and have a similar force on creativity in a way that we can say that YouTube has unlocked, and Twitch in particular, YouTube, Twitch, and TikTok in particular, these three have unlocked a new type of creativity and content and media and entertainment that was heretofore impossible, right? Because prior to that, we had, in the Hollywood system, you had to pay your dues. You had to work as a waiter. You had to go into central casting, which is it's a casting service. Like Brad Pitt went through central casting. You had to, do auditions. You have to become an assistant, and then you climb your way up through this system for years, right? And then find your way. And sometimes through talent alone, you rise up through the ranks. But in general, at least my impression, to be fair, of Hollywood is a scenario where people have had to crawl up that journey, and for good reason, because there's a craftsmanship to it, and there's an apprenticeship inside of it, and there's a process where writers spend time in a writer's room learning from other writers what that process is, and they get better as writers, and then they can then run shows and etc. There is this system, and it makes sense for a reason, and that's why they make great content. But at the same time, now you have a scenario where some dude named Mr. Beast or whatever can count to 1 million, and suddenly he's famous and now can do all these big production things. Fast forward 10-15 years for him, right? And that's what, and we're also with Twitch streamers, which is nuts. I watch Twitch streamers, and they are just like streaming themselves playing video games, are streaming themselves just hanging out, and they're getting tens of thousands, in Kai Cenat's case 20 million views off of just like hanging out for hours, for 10 hours straight, 20 hours straight. This is not something that Hollywood would have done, could have done without the internet, and would not have done on their own, because they are a classy type of content, so to speak. I'm not saying that, streamers are not classy, but I'm just saying that like that's kind of the content that the sophisticated content that Hollywood is interested in making, whereas streamers, it's a different level playing field. I can just put my phone here and boom, I'm streaming right away. So that it's a very different paradigm. And so I see AI as a similar force in this respect, right? Where AI could be this force where some kid in a suburb of Detroit can make a feature film using just AI tools, and doesn't need to fly out all the way out here to Hollywood to beg or propose to a bunch of investors that they don't know to fund an idea that they never would fund. I mean, like, take the example of Sylvester Stallone, right? Where if you look at the story of Rocky, like, how did he make Rocky? He like wrote the script after he went to see Muhammad Ali fight, and he was inspired by that. and he was in destitute poverty. He was about to sell his dog, right? And his script, and it's such a romantic story, right? Like that he could sell it to somebody, and the producers or what have you that were willing to fund it, or executive producers that were willing to fund it, were like, hey, we don't want you cast. And he was like, no, I want to be cast. It's a whole story. Look it up. But like, it's like these stories in a way don't need to happen anymore, because Sylvester Stallone doesn't need to necessarily be in destitute poverty and beg to get the money to fund a film that may not have made it and then end up with an Oscar. What we might see in the next 5-10 years is a scenario where this kid in like the suburbs of Vancouver or Detroit or, or Cape Town or Beijing, wherever, can make a full feature film with their laptop and have hundreds, thousands, millions of people view it. And it might not get the accolades, although I hope it will. I hope the really good AI films do make it to the Oscar level. It's a question mark on whether or not the Oscars will even accept that. But we have widespread acceptance of animation now as a medium, right? Which took a while. So I wonder if AI films will get to that level. But even if that's not the case, does that matter if there's such a large audience for them? Does it matter that Mr. Beast's 1 to 1 million counting thing is not accepted by Hollywood if he still gets his audience that is going to follow him anyway, that he gets to find on his own, right? And I think that's kind of the democratizing effect that I'm excited about, right? Where the traditional Hollywood system it exists within these kind of hidden barriers, right? And where we have YouTube and TikTok and all of those models allowing new creators to arise in a new model with new audiences, we're going to have new audiences for AI, right? For AI films, we're going to have new audiences that are okay with that, because over time, what's going to happen is that AI films, in my opinion, are going to become more and more acceptable. I mean, right now, if you just think about it, the amount of people who are just fine with misinformation, right? Who will just be like, oh yeah, they're completely fine with one side of a political spectrum and just believe anything that one side says, or they like one musician and they'll believe anything about that musician and hate the other musician that they have a beef with. Like, that is normalized now, and they will believe anything that is said on either side that suits their paradigm. To that extent, to me, that proves that, hey, the viewers don't necessarily care that much about provenance. They care about what is either confirming them or what's entertaining them, what's hitting that dopamine. And I think AI, and there's a dark side to that too, definitely, right? Where AI is going to get better at this, and it's going to get higher and higher fidelity, and we might not even be able to tell whether or not a thing is going to be AI or not, even though a lot of people here complain that or claim that they can tell. Like, that is going to go away. The progress that we've seen in AI tools in the last year is staggering, right? And it's nothing limiting them from getting even more high detailed in the next year or two or more, right? And so at some level, we're going to hit this tipping point where we're going to have a lot more AI content. We already have a lot of AI content. We're going to see a lot more video AI content, and that's going to become more and more acceptable. And the audience is going to change. The audience is probably going to think about what hits them or not, which is already what happens on TikTok and Snapchat and Instagram and all that. We're already at a level where it doesn't matter whether or not something is true or not. It matters whether or not it hits me or not, right? And so I think that's what's really interesting to me about what's happening here with democratization. Definitely the caveat here is like, who benefits, right? Like, who is benefiting from all this? Definitely AI tool companies, OpenAI and Meta and Runway and Luma and Dream Machine, and all these companies are Midjourney, et cetera. They are going to benefit from people not only using their tools, but their tools being used to create things that millions of people consume, 100%. And it's very possible that we're going to live in a world where creators still don't get compensated a lot. I mean, starving artist is a thing for a reason. I mean, even when we look at Spotify, we already exist in a world where creators get taken advantage of, right? Or maybe not to take advantage of, but it's a bloodbath out there, right? Where Spotify 90, maybe 95% of creators barely make much from Spotify. As a result, it's more like a marketing mechanism for them to do concerts. Or in the case of some people, they're like using OnlyFans instead of Spotify. Some people are making more money on OnlyFans than Spotify, which is mind-boggling, right? Because the business model sucks in the creative world, right? And so I wonder if that will continue to be true, and will AI disrupt that even further? I mean, the irony to me is that I hear a lot of people complaining that AI is going to destroy creativity, blah, blah, blah. Well, guess what? Creativity is already a minefield, a bloodbath, a very hard industry. Musicians, designers, artists, video filmmakers, like all of these industries have a scenario where the majority of people are barely making it, and then this high, like 20% to the top 5% are making millions or what have you, or even sometimes billionaires, right? Like, how is it that in basketball you have this scenario where or even soccer, right? When I watched, I don't know if you guys watched the TV show about that soccer team in England. I forget the name now. Wrexham, right? Wrexham, like all those football players were being paid like what, like a minimum wage, like $45,000 a year, maybe less. That's common, right? That's what's not normal is like how much the NBA is paid, right? Even OnlyFans, when they said that OnlyFans was making more money, the aggregate creators were making more money on OnlyFans than the NBA players were making in aggregate. Yes, true. But 95 to 96% or something like that of OnlyFans creators are barely making enough to pay their bills and their rent, etc. Like, that's the reality of the scenario, right? So AI isn't causing that. That's a reality that we already live in. Now, what AI might do is exacerbate that, or it'll unlock that. Maybe it'll make more opportunities, right? That's what I'm hopeful of. I don't know if that's going to happen, but it is definitely going to democratize how much content is being made. And that is what ultimately I think is going to be exciting and definitely disrupting to Hollywood, but also exciting because Hollywood is this gate-kept world where only certain people can tell those big stories, are allowed to, right? Because they have the financing, they have the network, they paid their dues. Well, guess what? AI is saying, hey, you don't need any of those things, for better and worse. And I think, to me, there's a lot of better here because Hollywood is really hard to break into. It's really hard. So I hope that gives some food for thought. I'd love to hear what you guys have thoughts for that. And just leave some comments on there and I'll make a response video. This is fun. Thanks so much for listening, and we'll jump in next time. See ya.